So welcome now to our panel discussion. So the session is now recorded. We have we have a couple of meetings before we organize the event and have discussed the major topics that will be interested to our audience based on panelist experience, of course, and also based on your suggestion that you submitted via Mentimeter before the event. And first of all, we would like to lean on Kirstin and Brian's experience on looking how AI is used in research funding. And I would like to ask Kirstin first. My first question would be from your strategic in policy perspective, what have been the key steps to Wellcome's approach to adapting AI in funding operations?
Thanks, Anna. And what a great turnout. Thank you very much for coming. As Anna said, I'm the AI product manager. So my role is to look at the sort of internal development of how we use AI as an organization. So AI has been in Wellcome for many years. It's really the advent of generative AI that has caused a sort of recent shift. So I think with everyone, it's very much the same. You sort of identify the need for doing something. There's new challenges and new opportunities. So Wellcome very much was in that same boat, and just really wanted to sort of mitigate risks, whether those were around sort of data protection, bias, information security, but also not wanting to miss out on a potential of opportunities that may arise from using AI. And because of this, the increased need, there was sort of a general focus on trying to create some sort of framework. So the immediate sort of strategy was to get some things in place, get a sort of tool, internal ChatGPT, and a new policy in place to make sure people were able to use something safely, and to give guidance around how to do that. The other thing was around creating a team, which I'm part of, to be able to really focus on the strategy and policy development to make sure that this whole sort of organisation-wide approach to make sure that we are really understanding how we're using AI, but also how we're using it safely. So it's a really big thing for Wellcome. The three sort of main points are obviously trying to keep up with the innovation, making sure that we are kept up to date on what's going on, but really understanding how that is done safely and ethically and sustainably, and then also understanding how we can bring everyone on that journey as well. So there's a big focus on enablement and making sure that staff are getting the right training and know how to use it and what they can and cannot use.
Thank you. Brian, I'm just wondering, you are responsible for Barts charity operation. Can you list a couple of more examples? How did you use AI and maybe some early takeaways?
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Anna. And really great to see everyone on the call. So to kind of build on Kirstin's point, we're a much smaller funder, so we're about 45 people. So we've had the luxury of being able to roll out Copilot across the entirety of our organisation to give everyone full licenses, with the intention of sort of making sure that no one's left behind and they have a safe space to experiment, and that's within our protected enterprise environment. So I think we're very conscious that everyone around us is using generative AI in some shape or form, especially grant applicants. We know that grant applicants, and we expect grant applicants to be using that as well. So our key thing is to make sure that staff are part of the journey so that everybody is aware of what generative AI is aware of the risks and the issues, but also the opportunities. So we have our internal AI policy, and we also have an external facing AI policy as well for those that we interact with. And very briefly, so our external policy says that applicants are not required to declare the use of AI, but they must own their content if they do choose to use generative AI. We insist that any of our reviewers, our panelists, or our peer reviewers don't use generative AI, because obviously the information that's being submitted to us in confidence should not go into the public domain, either intentionally or accidentally. And we also ask that assessors and staff don't judge whether or not generative AI has been used in an application, because we're aware of the biases and the connotations, and the possibly negative connotations that comes with. And most importantly, maybe most relevant to this audience, applicants must obey host organisation regulations that may exist, internal policies that you have within your own research institutions when submitting applications to us. So what we're trying to do is, the early takeaways that we've had from that is essentially that we need to find the right tool for the job. So we're trying Copilot at the moment, but we're comparing it against other tools. We're looking at whether or not there are specialized tools that can help peer review selection as well, but we don't make any decisions via AI or generative AI. So it's only assistance. There's always a human in the loop. And we're also making sure that we're part of networks like this, strong peer learning networks where you have other funders and other stakeholders where we can learn from other individuals. And I'll have to pop into chat some of those networks that we're part of that we found really, really useful to be able to provide more information. And that's really been helpful to make sure that everyone's taken on the same journey and everyone's reassured that this same challenge exists across the entirety of the sector.
Thank you, Brian. I'm just wondering, like a follow-up question, and thank you very much for letting everyone know about the disclosure of using AI as an applicant. But I'm just wondering, in terms of using AI in your organization, have you had any unexpected challenges or anything emerge while you implemented the tool into the funding process?
So in terms of adoption, I think is probably the main thing. Is it's a new tool. I think what we've experienced is that we've employed someone separately, a company called AI Confident, to be able to assist in providing protected time for staff to be able to tell them what generative AI is, make sure that they're aware that AI is not a new thing. It's been around for ages. And I think the branding of AI is part of the issue that we're tackling at the moment, separating large language models from newly generative AI, but also giving time to staff to practice things like prompting techniques, to actually take tasks they have on a day-to-day basis, apply it to our Copilot instance and see what the benefits are that they can generate from that. So those are the key things that we found, is regardless of whether or not you have the right tool or you've deployed the right tool, giving people the opportunity to do that within a protected space has been quite important.
Yeah, thank you. Kirstin, I just to expand what Brian has just mentioned, what are the key internal factors like leadership, culture, collaboration at Wellcome make the biggest difference in getting AI tools into practice?
Well, I think in the first instance, leadership support is really integral, and I think that we've had a lot of support from leadership. So I think it's one of the biggest factors in our success. I think understanding what the needs are. There's a lot of people coming to you with suggestions of ways to do things, of what they want to try and do, but then there's also this other perspective, which is like what's really valuable to Wellcome. And actually it's really the leadership that is able to sort of really come up with some key ideas around what's sort of aligning to our strategy and what we should prioritize. So I think actually we've had a lot of support from leadership, but also I think in terms of driving it forward, it's been pretty integral.
Thank you. Okay, that was very valuable, and thank you for Kirstin, Brian, for sharing your experiences. We can maybe move to yet another part of the discussion, which is very important, about peer review, fairness and transparency in the funding process. And John, my first question is to you. I was wondering how you or Research Council Norway is thinking about the role of AI in peer review, and Are there specific areas where it can support fairness and transparency?
Yes, so hello everyone. We're excited to be here in the UK virtually today with an audience that knows a lot about how to produce research proposals, and we are on the other side, and that's important that we have this discussion. And I think that peer review will remain the basic mechanism for research evaluation. So that's an important starting point. The fundamental role of peer review in securing research quality and integrity is currently lifted up in the policy agendas like the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, COARA, that you probably know of, and where the Research Council of Norway is a signatory. Still, we know that peer review is not without limitation and flaws, like the natural tendency for conservatism and the lack of transparency that makes it difficult to discover and discuss different types of biases. And peer review is also very time-consuming for all the parties involved, researchers writing their proposals and waiting for them to be assessed, the Research Council recruiting their relevant reviewers, and the time spent on reviewing the proposals. So we might ask, and we should ask, how AI could help improve peer review. And I will give you 2 examples. So at the Research Council of Norway, we use AI to match research proposals and reviewers. This is a task that is well suited for AI because we have similar types of scientific text on both sides. On one side, we create an embedding of the project proposal, and on the other side, we use the publications of the reviewers in our database to create a representation of their competency. And then we use AI to produce a ranked list of potential reviewers to the case officers, matching those 2 types of text. And this supports the decision of the case officer, which always has the final word. The automated matching has certainly improved efficiency of our assessment process and could also improve consistency and transparency in the selection of experts. But if you zoom out, my second example is about how to use AI, or the potential to use AI, to open up the black box of peer review. We could, for instance, use AI to explore the characteristics of funded versus unfunded projects to look for differences in patterns. Such patterns could indicate properties that are associated with fundable and non-fundable projects. And such properties may include well-known biases like genders or affiliations, or new until now undocumented biases. So in this way, AI might help in the future to promote the fairness and transparency of peer review, I think.
Thank you, John. Peter, I think you it's your area of expertise as well. I just wonder, you have done a tremendous amount of peer review working on the review reform. I'm just wondering, how do you see AI enhancing or potentially undermining transparency and trust in research assessment?
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks all for coming. And thanks, Jon, for those really helpful points, which I think I broadly agree with. I think what is really important is to understand the landscape in which research assessment is now happening. And across our work, we're sort of seeing research assessment pulling in 2 directions. And one is driven by the fact that there is a huge amount of peer review burden. We're seeing assessment happening in more and more places. There's simply more and more assessment that needs to get done, and this costs time, resources, and so forth. And the other pull is towards the idea that what we consider to be good science has actually broadened quite a lot over the last few decades and even over the last few years. So we're not just looking at very narrowly defined research quality, we're looking at impact, we're looking at underlying research environments and so forth. A lot of the simple broad brush indicators we used in the past don't really work anymore, so we're having to do more complicated things. And I think this is where Jon's point really comes into it. We're going to, and hopefully AI can be used to actually measure and assess a far broader variation and definition of what constitutes good research, particularly if we're being evaluative. We want to understand where do we see uptake of research and so forth. So I think that's really important. We're publishing a report on this coming Monday morning on responsible research assessment. So you can look out on the RoRI website for that coming up. And we did a few questions there actually to research funders about how they're using AI, and the top way in which, to give a very brief sneak peek, the top way in which they are doing so is actually precisely as Jon said, AI assisted reviewer allocation. We're seeing it there. What's far less often the case is, so there are some funders who are experimenting to see, can you use AI to just cut off the bottom 20 or 30% quality wise of application. It's not done very commonly yet, and again there's not much trust in those processes, whereas I think with AI assisted review allocation we are seeing that. The final point I would just make is that trust problems may become worse if there are system incentives to excessively use AI. In other words, if there are system incentives for researchers to publish in huge volume or to apply for research funding and for research grants in particularly large volume, then we start to incentivize both within funding organizations, but I think also within institutions, perhaps suboptimal forms of AI. So I think just as in the past, we say, don't reward researchers by the number of publications or you'll see salami slicing. We're seeing the potential for a whole new generation, I suppose, of perverse incentives. And we need to, I think, watch those quite hawkishly to not undermine trust.
Thank you very much. Follow-up question, what would you suggest instead? What would be the right way forward if not providing incentive for submitting application? What should we at the institution incentivize?
I mean, it depends on the context of each individual. Different countries have some. In some countries, some systems, we actually see a drive towards productivity and a need to just kind of bring productivity up. But overall, I think certainly in the UK context, the question we're kind of edging towards, particularly with this people, culture and environment stuff in REF, is what are the underlying conditions that make an individual piece of really outstanding, really impactful research happen? That's, as far as I understand, what a lot of this research environment stuff is about. And I think there will be, forms of text mining, forms of, analysis of large volumes of data around impacts, around underlying research environment, where AI, I think, will be able to tell us things. But I think having performance criteria along the lines of number of publications or, number of grants or amount of grants secured, I think that's quite dangerous, because then you're opening the floodgates for, I've said this before, where every researcher uses ChatGPT to make their applications. It goes to the funder who have to use AI to process them all. And in the end, you get, AI generated reviews. And at that point, you have a bit of a system collapse moment. So those are the incentives I wouldn't want to see.
Thank you. Jon, Brian, you are nodding. Do you have anything to add?
I really like Peter's last example of kind of the system collapse thing, I think, and if we were looking at kind of the future of what grant funding or the risks that are associated, what a future of grant funding might look like, I think that's a really powerful example that we need to mitigate. And I think where we come from as a sort of a local funder, we work to build relationships with those people that we're funding. So regardless of what happens to the grant application system or AI, we're developing those relationships. And one of the points I think we need to pick up in the sector is, what happens if you completely remove AI, or public mistrust in AI grows so much that you can no longer use it in what we're trying to do? What remains? How do we still give grants? How do we still build relationships with the people that we're trying to fund?
Thank you. Jon, do you have anything to add?
Well, I will get back to some ethical issues later, I think, so I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. So let's move. Yeah, let's move to the ethical issue, then straight from this topic. Jan, I was wondering, so what ethical consideration guide your decision at the Research Council Norway about where AI should and shouldn't be used in funding process?
Yeah, so that's a really hard question that we are now struggling with. And I would say that the speed of technological development is making it hard to produce very precise regulations or clear guidelines on what researchers should and should not do with AI. We know that researchers are using AI tools increasingly. I'm sure the audience here is confronted with that every day. I know that, well, it might be really a new tool for a research administrator and manager to be able to support researchers in their unit with AI. And currently, research policy initiative at EU level is aiming at accelerating the adoption of AI in research. Our strategy so far at the Research Council of Norway has been just to refer to traditional ethical and professional standards of research. They actually cover mostly what we need. And other relevant regulations like the European General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and intellectual property rights that need to be respected as before. So, I mean, really talking with the research institutions about the importance to continue working on research integrity and ethics, I think that's the most important thing we can do, and follow the development that goes on in research in general. But we also use AI in our assessment processes. We develop different AI services at the Research Council of Norway, and we do that in a multidisciplinary team just to have the different aspects, both technical, organizational, ethical, and strategical in mind when we develop our services. So I come from an evaluation background, and I'm part of a team with also people from data science. So what does responsible use of AI look like from our side? The first principle, or the first thing we ask when there is demand for a new AI service, is for possible effects of that service. So how could a specific service affect the outcomes and the impacts of our funding? So we try to assess whether the use of AI to match research proposals to reviewers, for instance, may give a higher chance of funding to specific research fields or themes. So such biases may come from the data we use for the matching. Not all disciplines are well covered in the publication databases we use when creating these embeddings. To mitigate the risk of such unintended consequences, we set clear limits for when and how AI may be used by our scientific officers, and we monitor possible effects of the outcomes of the AI-assisted assessments. Finally, I will add that much of the knowledge we use to manage the use of AI in our council is rooted in traditional evaluation practices. We start with the goals set for the Research Council, and we then ask to what extent the use of AI might support or divert our goal achievement. Taking our organizational goals as a starting point is quite different from starting with the general assumption that we see around us, that AI provide efficiency gain or will provide efficiency gains in the public sector. I would say that such efficiency gains are not much worth if they bring us faster in the wrong direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Brian, I'm just wondering because now John has outlined how we apply the ethics to reduce the potential bias. I wonder if you could maybe tell us about your experience at Barts charity, if you are using similar mechanism, or what is your opinion on this?
So we've chosen not to use it as part of the sort of the funding process at the moment, because I think we're still quite early in our journey. I think we're very conscious of the risks that are associated there, that I think that Jon's made very clear. So what we're looking at are internal ways that we can use AI to essentially eliminate very burdensome, repetitive tasks that sort of sit within our own internal staff. So that's not necessarily affecting the funding process at all, but it's things like this, for example, our meeting transcription is one of the number one use cases around for generative AI. The very repetitive things where you have to mine information from the internet or from freely available sources to validate and to kind of get information to be able to look at things like fundraising options. Again, could be leveraged by an AI agent. So I think it's those sort of elements that we're looking at. As I said, we don't use it for decision making. I think one of the things that we're very conscious of is that you need to get your data and your processes right before you start to implement any kind of AI over the top of any kind of process. Otherwise, you're just going to end up doing the same inefficient processes far quicker, or you're going to highlight issues with your data far more quickly or at far greater risk than you otherwise would have if you hadn't used generative AI. So I think those are the key things for us. Is I think the sector is quite cautious. I think we look to others to do a lot of rapid experimentation. I think there are a number of instances where we've actually paused what we're doing because we're not quite sure we're going to proceed in the right way. And actually, the sector is moving so quickly that things have moved on, and the right answer has come about. Or say, for example, the Copilot tool that we have licensed has integrated some of the things which people were experimenting with on ChatGPT. So I think if you wait long enough, things kind of uncrinkle themselves. So I think part of what we're trying to do is to make sure we treat it as a change operation. And the technology is just what's happening to everybody, as opposed to jumping on the next thing just because it looks good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just also wondering, so from what I'm hearing, there is a kind of everyone is using AI, everyone has own policies and successes, but there is, I'm just wondering if the use of AI, in your experience, can deepen, well, unintentionally deepen existing inequalities in funding process and success rate for the applicants. Is that, and any of you can be free to jump in, maybe and contribute. I'm just wondering if there is any risk of anything you have seen so far.
I'm just jumping in to say that I think that as well as we're very conscious of everything that we do and making sure that we review everything where AI is, there could be a potential risk. I think also there's also areas where AI could potentially do the opposite. For instance, actually, when John was talking about the sort of matching people, I think sometimes based on the fact that it's quite difficult to do these processes, there's also limitations to how many people that you can find to be reviewers, for instance. But actually, by employing sort of these sorts of technologies, then the breadth of people that you can find is a lot greater. And then also there's the ability to expand and make sure that the people that you are selecting for reviewing, etc., are less biased than our previous sampling methods. So I think there are ways that AI can actually help, but we just need to be really mindful of the way we're using it.
Yes, just maybe to add to that, we have to be very careful to not have this kind of reduction to the mean, because where you have a lot of data, you can do good predictions, but at the fringes, it's difficult. So for smaller disciplines or subdisciplines, you might have a problem of matching experts, or even worse, subdiscipline that is small might be then matched to a researcher from a broader neighboring discipline, because there is more data on this type of research. So we need to really watch the fringes.
Thank you. I have a question in terms of transparency for applicants. So what, in your opinion, what kind of transparency of using AI in making funding decision do applicants deserve? What should we know, what we shouldn't know as applicants? That's And you are free to jump in and contribute.
Well,
I mean,
as a fund, yeah. I'm sorry. As a funder, I feel the call. Well, I think the process should be very clearly described so that we will find on RCN pages the criterias. Also, we publish the names of the reviewers that we have used. We publish that after the funding decision. And when it comes to AI, we also now are working much more than before on documenting our services. So how they are constructed, the types of risks that we have been considering, and how we mitigate those risks and how we monitor the services. So I think for AI, it's also important to be very transparent about the development and monitoring of it, and be clear about the limitations.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo that, and I think particularly for public governmental research funders, I think obviously processes I think always needed to be as transparent as possible, and obviously would continue to be so, and in charitable funders as well, of course. What I would add to that, and it's sort of been between the lines here, I think in a lot of this stuff, part of transparency and part of perceived trust and risk really lies around experimentation and evaluation. And this is done, I mean, this is me sort of in a way sort of tooting the research on research horn, but among research funders, this is already happening. We're doing controlled experiments, running one call through AI assisted reviewer selection and traditional reviewer selection and see what difference it makes. All this sort of stuff at the level of research funders, it's happening. The level which I must say, from our perspective, I suppose we know less about is the institutional level and what's going on there, how exactly AI is being used there. And again, the more we have systematic trials and the more those results are then also published and shared, by all means, as part of application processes. If you say as a funder, or indeed even in an internal institutional selection process, we do it in this and this way, we use AI at this point, we're doing this because it's more efficient, and by the way, here's a study that looked into this and has found that it is actually good or eliminates bias and whatnot. The more you can have that, essentially, the more you speak the language of researchers, of scientists, and use the scientific method on processes and on AI implementation, the better. And I think that's why transparency is incredibly important.
Yeah, I would also like to. Thank you very much, Peter. I would also like to twist around the question. So, what transparency would you require from us? And Brian, you mentioned this before. It varies from funder to funder, but I'm just wondering what kind of transparency you require at the moment, and how would you see this develop in the next couple of years as well, based on, especially Peter, you are experimenting a lot, you just mentioned as well. So should we disclose use of AI? What would be the trend? If you could give us a little bit insight into this, would be great.
I mean, to my knowledge, whenever there are internal institutional selection processes that sort of happen before a research funder comes into it, most of the time those processes are pretty invisible to research funders. I mean, in my previous life, I was an evaluator and evaluated funding schemes for research funders, where if there were institutional selection processes, generally, I mean, it was me as an evaluator who would get in touch with institutions to even figure those out. So I don't think there is, I'm not sure about what the expectation is there. If a funder has a clear policy of, AI should not be used, then of course that needs to be communicated. More generally, though, I think it's been interesting to see what goes on at the institutional level, because at the institutional level, AI first became an object of interest around teaching, and I think the first reaction at most institutions would be, we ban students to use AI. And I think that ship has basically sailed, and it has now come around to, no, we teach our students to use AI responsibly, sensibly, and not to feed personal data into, you know, a server somewhere out in Silicon Valley, and so forth. And I think when it comes to research, we're just sort of, I think we've passed that point a little bit quicker. I think there's still, you know, to an extent, there is a sense of, oh, well, you know, we should be careful with the use of AI. But the idea that researchers will not use AI, I think that's getting increasingly fanciful. And I think, and a few people have said it, I think the same principles that existed before AI still apply, you know, ethics, integrity, not sharing data in places that you're not supposed to. And I think those would be violations of research ethics and integrity now, just as they are before. Just with AI, there's an additional 100 ways to do those violations. So that's, I think, where we need to be careful.
Yeah. Perfect, thank you. Let's move on. So it's kind of like very good opening to the next section to discuss on where we are going, so how the future of funding will look like. And Kirstin, I have a first question to you. Maybe you can let us know what lessons have you learned in Wellcome Trust about evaluating AI tools for responsible use in research funding?
Yeah, so we're doing quite a few evaluations. Many more of the evaluations we've done are with the sort of personal productivity tools. So we've similarly to Brian, we've evaluated, we've sort of done a trial of Copilot and an evaluation of that, and our internal Wellcome ChatGPT. We also are starting to evaluate sort of other tools such as for reviewer finding, and we're looking at also how we might use tools in sort of embedding those sort of operational processes to improve efficiency. So there's quite a few ways which we're looking at. Some of the initial findings, so in terms of the sort of personal productivity tools, I will say it's a lot more difficult to understand effectiveness for personal productivity than it is for operational effectiveness, because of the fact that it's so subjective. But we have had a lot of feedback from people about what sort of held them up in terms of adoption. And it's actually, if it sort of helps, it's the same sorts of concerns with the staff that it is, I think, in the research community. It's that perceived sort of trust. So people don't want to use them if they can't trust them. And actually, in terms of one of our biggest barriers to adoption was perceived trust. So and not wanting to do it wrong, and not wanting to put the wrong data in, and not wanting to have something that they didn't want to put their name to. So actually, that integrity piece is really important. So they won't use it if they don't think it's going to do as good a job as they would. So that's really sort of interesting and hopefully helpful to hear. A couple of the other things were around, so we had a big question around our sustainability goals, and was this sort of helping to sort of us to meet those. And I think Brian put something in the chat. It's a very difficult area to focus on, especially now when it's sort of very new, and this emerging technologies, there's sort of battle to, you know, innovation versus trying to sort of mitigate that risk. And we've done a literature review trying to unpick some of the things that we could potentially do, what we as a funder can do to help mitigate that risk. Obviously, it's bigger than us, but the things that we can personally do are making sure that we are really mindful when we look at sort of each of the products that we bring in. What are those companies doing towards their sustainability goals? And the other things around our sort of enablement piece about how we help people to understand how they can personally reduce their impact. So only use AI where it is going to add benefit. Try and be really mindful with your prompting. So don't sort of repeatedly prompt, try and keep that, make sure that you've had the training to have prompt and sort of that really shaped prompt, and then therefore you can use it less. And also around image generation, which is by far the biggest sort of perpetrator in this. So there's those sorts of things. The other key I suppose benefit is actually we found a lot of people fed back the positive impacts in terms of accessibility and really supporting their sort of needs in terms of some of the sort of neurodiversity and others. So we do really think that AI can be very helpful, and I think like others, we just want to make sure that journey is smooth. So right.
Yeah, thank you. What would be your three? What would be your advice for institutions who are starting the AI adoption journey?
I think it's different. It definitely depends on the size of your organization. So I think that, as Brian said, it's your path is very much, I suppose, potentially limited by the buy-in from leadership and potentially budget as well, because it's not a cheap thing. I think most of all, it's that sort of race with in terms of trying to get people to use the right things. It's very difficult to police in a large organization. That's probably our biggest thing, is that it's so accessible that people want to use it, and it's just trying to keep up with that governance piece. So I feel like, in a way, the larger the organization, the more it's around trying to have the right guardrails in place to make sure that it's available, the right tools are available, and actually to help people understand what tools are the most useful for different tasks. So meeting management is a real particular pain point of a lot of people. So being able to sort of allow people to have the best tool for that and make that accessible for them. Sorry, that's not three. That's but there's a few learnings and a few different ways that people can do it. I think definitely supporting each other. I think, but one of the biggest things we found is having champions and being able to help sort of build a community internally. I think it's almost impossible to give someone a tool and expect everyone to know how to use it. I think the best ways has been when we've had pockets. So people, lots of people in the same team or in the same department have had a tool, and therefore, they're all trying to do the same task, and they can all help each other to really understand how to use it appropriately and effectively.
Thank you. Peter, the next question is to you. What trends are you seeing in how institutions are starting to engage with funders' use of AI, and what practical steps should they be taking now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this relatively short. I think I sort of answered it earlier, but I was in a meeting this morning actually for our Grail project, which looks at AI among research funders, and we'll be publishing a handbook on AI use for research funders in about a month's time. But one of the things that came out there was that funders were really happy to have a forum to discuss this stuff and to even just begin to compare notes. And my sense is that the same is probably the case for institutions. Like I said, I think institutions, having now long ago taken the leap in teaching to understand AI is not the next Wikipedia. You can't just ban it. You have to actually teach proper use of it. And I think, at the level of research, this is happening as well. And I think, and there are some, kind of shared declarations. I think the Russell Group made one last year, I think, on, how do we approach AI in research funding. But I think the next obvious practical step is, keep talking to each other. Make sure you have a forum for these sort of things to discuss how we're feeling about this, what is working, what is not working. Are we undertaking at, institution X certain things, certain uses of AI that actually seem to work? Because my sense is, particularly at the institutional level, that a lot of people feel very alone. When actually, there's 160 odd places just in this country that are all confronting much the same problem. So whether that's through the established groups, Russell Group, UUK, and so forth, or indeed whether other forums, get together and keep talking, would be my main piece of advice right now. That may not be very satisfactory, but that'd be the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm a little bit trying to calculate the time because we started a little bit later. Let's maybe switch now to Q&A, and thank you for the first part of the event today and providing really great answers so far. Okay, I will read a question and maybe you can come forward if you feel confident to answer. The first question is from Louise. So I have concerns around the use of AI as disciplinary expert by effectively keeping some of the workflows in a black box of generative AI. Does it mean that some of their workflows are lost, and does it result in reduced training opportunities for people who are learning to fully recognize one piece of work, such as funding proposal, isn't of the appropriate level? Yeah, not quite sure, John.
So if I understand correctly, it's about the process of doing research or making a proposal, that if you use ChatGPT or other LLMs, the process will actually be in the shade. It will not be entirely transparent. Is that correct? That's the problem?
Yes. Yes, this is how I interpret this actually.
And I think that's a very serious problem. It has been covered by some of the reports that has come out recently, like the Canadian Research Councils, where they point out that even if we can get AI right, I mean, use AI to fold proteins or many things, if we don't understand how that result is brought about, we are actually not doing research in the the fundamentally human sense of it, trying to understand the world. So if we don't understand how the AI is producing a result, I think we're really departing from the fundamental value of doing research as humans.
Yeah, and I think Luis just texted, so the context, it's peer review process, but
using AI in peer review. Yeah. Well, I mean, if those who write the articles use AI and then the reviewers use it too, I mean, it's kind of meaningless. So I hope we find the other ways of saving time than that. Yeah.
If I may, I think this also comes back to the point I made earlier. We need to make sure we limit peer review to the places and the times where it actually makes sense, right? I think, again, the more pressure you put on peer review, the more you create incentives to use. I mean, I'm with Jon, and also I think with the commenters' concerns here, that if you actually use AI for the actual peer reviewing process itself, that's not good. However, if you have incentives that mean your average funding scheme gets 1,000 rather than 100 applications, and you have peer reviewers having to sift through, frankly, quite a lot of garbage proposals, that's where you run into problems. So I think let's try and focus peer review on where we have potentially good science that needs to be evaluated. And then do it there. And at that point, I think it's fair to mandate not to use AI once an academic expert has a potentially good research idea written by someone in front of them.
Thank you. The next question is from Sumona. GenAI is very dependent on the data, and it has been trained on, which currently it's very West-centric, for want a better word. How do you ensure that in the matching process, AI is ensuring inclusive matching? I think again, it's more rather a question to John and Peter.
Well, for the matching algorithm we have at Research Council of Norway, we actually use a very simple TF-IDF model. So it's just about using the textual representation of the project, so the proposal, and match it to a textual representation of the publications of the authors. So the bias here will come in with the data we have. So of course the international databases for publications, they are biased, and we should be mindful of that. And I think that's really an important point that the listener, the attendant is making here, that we really need to think more about the underlying data of the models.
Thank you, John. I will take one more last question before we wrap up from Anna. How do you enforce or ban or monitor the use of AI in contexts where that use is not allowed under the organizational policy?
I can try and do a bit about what we're doing. It's very, as I said, it's very difficult when you've got 1,000 people in your organization to really police this. There has been times when, for instance, like meetings, that people join with tools that maybe aren't approved, and therefore, and because of the way that these tools work, sometimes they can act a bit like parasites and just attach to meetings and start recording and sending out emails at the end, which is wrapping up what's been said in the meeting, which is not ideal because it can it's not giving consent to, or any of these sort of other issues that we have. So we have at the technology level, we've made it blocking these things. So if these things come up, we block them. However, in terms of being able to understand what people are using, so it's very difficult if people can be using their work laptop and not using their work emails, or people could be using a personal device to do work. It's very hard to ensure that people aren't using things correctly. So it really is about that education piece and really providing the things that allow them to do these tasks without having to go using tools that they shouldn't be.
Thank you. Okay, so we are nearing the session today. I'm sorry you couldn't take a lot of questions. Maybe at the very end, just to wrap up the session, if we can start maybe with John, Brian, Kirstin, and then Peter, if you can just let us know your final thoughts, but based on the conversation today, and major takeaways, especially for us at universities.
Yeah, so I mean, this discussion between you working at universities and also in the managing and administrative roles is really important for us to understand how the practices around research proposal writing is developing. So we have these kinds of forums in Norway as well. So I will just say that I find it very valuable to be able to participate in these forums, and I would have liked to hear more from your community, but that time was too short.
Thank you.
I will. Sorry.
Right.
I was just going to say, I think it's very much a case of that we're all in the same boat, and it's not sort of funders and researchers. It's all together in terms of we're all trying to navigate a new world, a new era, and actually a lot of the concerns you have are shared, and we obviously nobody wants to introduce bias or potential risk. So I think we're all working together towards the same goal. So it's about open communication and transparency, really, even whether it's within an organisation or between.
Thank you, Brian.
I think I'd reinforce the points around sort of making it worthwhile AI. So if you're experimenting, make sure you ask the questions around whether or not it's worthwhile. Make sure it's in a safe environment. And I'd definitely echo sort of making sure that people don't get left behind. Have your staff help to influence leadership, engage your leadership directly as well. And sometimes it takes things like extreme examples to build that resilience and to build that familiarity, to actually shock people into realizing that this thing is here to stay, and actually you need to adopt it.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, first of all, I would echo all of that and say, train responsible AI use, which can in large part draw on all the established principles we have for good scientific practice already. And secondly, again, just to come back to the point of incentives, if incentives for researchers are to simply produce large volumes of stuff, of written stuff, that is where AI, I think, is going to start being a real problem. So I think hopefully we can get to a point of smart data analysis and simplification by AI, and also perhaps going back from huge volumes of written stuff to, you know, talking to people and having actual human oversight and understanding of what makes for good science. And I think then we'll probably be in a happy place, I hope.
Thank you all. My final takeout is that, as Kirstin said, we are in the same boat. Sharing the problem, sharing experiences, it's so important, and having the discussion that we have today, it's a right step, the right step in the right direction. Thank you very much, John, Brian, Kirstin, and Peter, for wonderful panel discussion, and thank you everyone who has attended the session today, and it's going to view later on online. And I hope that the discussion keep on going in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.